I woke up to the smell of smoke. Not the comforting kind from a fireplace or a backyard bonfire. No, this was acrid, sharp, and wrong. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs. Something was burning. Throwing on my boots, I sprinted outside, the cold morning air hitting my face like a slap. And then I saw it, my hay bales. My entire winter feed for the livestock was nothing but a mountain of flames, crackling and spitting embers into the sky. The sight was so shocking, so utterly impossible to comprehend, that for a moment all I could do was stand there, mouth open, watching thousands of dollars worth of hay go up in smoke. Panic finally kicked in. I grabbed the hose, but it was like throwing a cup of water at a house fire. My cows were mooing nervously in the distance, the heat radiating off the inferno making the whole farm feel like a furnace. The fire department arrived within minutes, sirens wailing through the dawn, but I knew it was too late. By the time they got the flames under control, all that was left were blackened stumps of what used to be my hay bales. The fire chief walked over, shaking his head. "This wasn't an accident," he said grimly. "This was arson." That one word sent my mind racing. Who would do something like this? Who hated me enough to destroy my livelihood, to put my animals at risk? And then it hit me. Karen. The thought of her made my blood boil hotter than the fire itself. Karen Withers, my neighbor from hell, had been complaining about my hay bales for months. "They ruin my view," she had whined. "I didn't buy a house next to a farm just to stare at stacks of dead grass." I had shrugged her off, thinking she'd get over it. Clearly, I had underestimated her level of crazy. I turned to the fire chief. "Do you have any proof?" He sighed. "We'll need to investigate, but if you have security cameras, check them." Security cameras? Yes. My barn had cameras. My cousin Andy had set them up after a group of raccoons broke into my feed shed last spring. If there was any justice in the world, those cameras had caught Karen in the act. I stormed back into the house and called Andy. 15 minutes later, he was at my place, laptop open, scrolling through the footage. I leaned over his shoulder, my fingers tapping impatiently against the table. "There," Andy said suddenly, pausing the video. The grainy footage showed a shadowy figure near the hay bales late last night. The person was dressed in dark clothes, moving suspiciously close to the stacks. A flash of light, a flicker of flame, and then the fire erupted. The figure took a step back, watching for a second before scurrying away. My hands clenched into fists. It wasn't crystal clear, but I had a strong feeling that the figure was Karen. The way they walked, the height, it all matched. "This isn't solid proof," Andy muttered. "It's good, but she could argue it wasn't her." That was the problem. Karen was smart in the worst way. She wasn't just going to confess out of guilt, she didn't have any. If I wanted her to go down for this, I needed more. I marched over to her house, not bothering to calm down. I pounded on her door, and after a few seconds, she opened it, her usual smug expression in place. "Well, if it isn't Farmer Boy," she said, sipping from an oversized coffee mug. "What brings you to my doorstep at this ungodly hour?" "You know exactly why I'm here," I snapped. "My hay bales are gone. Burned. And I think you had something to do with it." Her expression didn't even change. If anything, she looked bored. "Oh, that's terrible," she said, completely unconvincing. "But I was at my book club last night. You can ask any of the ladies. We were discussing Great Expectations." I narrowed my eyes. "The last book club meeting you had was just an excuse to drink wine and gossip about the mailman." She smirked. Multitasking is a skill. Every word that came out of her mouth made me want to throttle her, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my temper wouldn't get me anywhere. "Look," I said, taking a deep breath. "I have security footage. Someone was at my farm last night, setting the fire. It looks an awful lot like you." For the first time, something flickered across her face. A tiny crack in her confidence. But she recovered fast. "Oh please," she scoffed. "If you had actual proof, you wouldn't be standing here trying to scare me. You'd be calling the cops. I gritted my teeth. She was right. What I had wasn't enough to get her arrested, but it was enough to make her nervous. Just know this, Karen, I said, stepping closer. I'm not letting this go. If you did this, I'll prove it. And when I do, you're going down for arson. She just smiled, taking another sip of coffee. Good luck with that, farmer boy. I turned and walked away, my blood boiling. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I reached my house, Andy met me on the porch, his laptop still open. We need something better, he said. A confession. Hard proof. Something she can't weasel out of. I exhaled slowly, already formulating a plan. If Karen thought she could burn down my hay and walk away scot-free, she was in for a rude awakening. This was war. And I intended to win. I sat on my porch, staring at the charred remains of my hay bales, the smell of burnt grass still lingering in the air. Karen had gotten away with it, at least for now. But there was no way I was going to let her walk free after torching my farm supplies. She had been smug, too smug, and that meant she thought she had covered her track. That was her mistake. If she thought she could outsmart me, she was in for a surprise. Andy sat next to me, tapping away at his laptop, replaying the security footage over and over again. It's definitely someone with her height and build, he muttered. But it's too blurry. No way a court's going to take this as solid proof. I ran a hand through my hair, frustrated. We need something stronger. A confession. Something undeniable. And he smirked. You thinking what I'm thinking? I grinned. Oh, I'm thinking exactly what you're thinking. The best way to catch a liar was to make them feel untouchable. And Karen? She thought she was invincible. All it would take was the right kind of pressure and she'd slip up. That evening, I paid her another visit, this time with a different approach. I knocked on her door and when she opened it, I made sure to look more defeated than angry. I just came to say that I overreacted earlier, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. I don't have any proof, and I probably won't get any. I guess I just have to accept that the fire was an accident. She raised an eyebrow. Wow. Look at you, finally using some common sense. I forced a chuckle. Yeah, I guess I was just upset. That was a lot of hay. Cost me a fortune. I don't even know how I'll recover from it. She took a sip of her ever-present wine glass, leaning against the doorframe. That's what happens when you put a bunch of dry grass in one place. Fires happen. Maybe you should be more careful next time. I nodded, pretending to absorb her oh-so-helpful wisdom. Yeah. It's just weird, though. The fire department said it started from an open flame. Like someone actually said it. She scoffed. Well, that's ridiculous. Who would do something like that? I shrugged. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I guess I have to let it go. No evidence, no case, right? She smirked again. That same insufferable smirk. Exactly. I left, and the moment I got back to my house, I played the recording. Every single word she had just said had been captured on my phone. She hadn't confessed outright, but she had done something just as good. She had acknowledged how the fire started. She had slipped. Andy grinned when I played it for him. She's too arrogant. She can't help but gloat. I nodded. Now we just need something bigger. Something that leaves no room for doubt. That was when the idea hit me. If Karen thought she had gotten away with it, she wouldn't be careful. She'd be overconfident. Which meant she'd panic if she thought she was caught. The next day, I staged a fire drill. I called up a couple of my farmhands, borrowed a fog machine from the community theater, and set up a controlled burn in a fire pit a good distance away from the main property. Then, I made sure Karen saw it. Right on cue, as soon as the smoke started rising, Karen burst out of her house, her face pale. Not again, she shrieked. Bingo. Sheriff Dave, who had been watching from his car, raised an eyebrow at her reaction. I walked up to her, keeping my face as neutral as possible. Not again. I asked casually. She blinked rapidly, realizing her mistake. I meant fires happen all the time. This town is just full of careless people. Dave stepped out of his car, arms crossed. Karen, is there something you'd like to share with us? She quickly regained her composure, flipping her hair. Oh please, Sheriff. This is ridiculous. I have better things to do than talk about some silly little farm fire. Dave wasn't buying it. You seem pretty jumpy for someone with nothing to hide. She laughed, but it was forced. I have places to be. I smirked. Yeah, your book club, right? What was it you were reading again? How to Get Away with Arson. Her eyes narrowed. Cute. But I had her rattled, and that was enough for now. Back at the farm, Andy was already digging deeper into her alibi. I called a few of the book club ladies, he said, grinning. Guess what? Karen left early that night. Said she had a headache. Around the same time the fire started. That was the final nail in her coffin. I handed everything over to Sheriff Dave. The footage, the recording, and the witness statements. He listened, nodding slowly, and when it was all over, he let out a low whistle. That's a lot of circumstantial evidence. I tensed. Circumstantial? He smiled. Relax, Jake. It's enough to get a warrant. And once we search her place, well, I wouldn't be surprised if we find a little more proof. The next morning, the sheriff showed up at Karen's door with a search warrant. I made sure to be outside, casually fixing a fence, just so I could watch the chaos unfold. Karen came outside, demanding to know what was happening. When Dave told her they were searching for evidence related to the fire, she went pale. I don't have anything like that, she said, crossing her arms. This is harassment. Dave ignored her, and about 20 minutes later, one of the deputies came out holding something in a plastic bag. Sheriff, you're going to want to see this. I craned my neck, trying to get a better look. It was a pair of boots, designer, expensive-looking, and covered in what looked suspiciously like ash. Dave held them up. Karen, care to explain why your boots are covered in burnt hay? Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she looked genuinely panicked. I stepped forward, crossing my arms. Looks like you stepped in your own mess. She glared at me. You set me up. I raised an eyebrow. You mean I forced you to set my hay on fire? Dave chuckled. Karen Withers, you're under arrest for arson. And just like that, the smugness was gone. She sputtered, trying to come up with an excuse, but nothing came. They cuffed her right there in her driveway while half the town watched. As they put her in the car, she turned and hissed, You think this is over, Jake? I grinned. Oh, I'm pretty sure it is. The moment the car pulled away, I let out a long breath. Karen had finally gotten what she deserved. But something told me the best part was still yet to come. The whole town was buzzing. Karen's arrest had spread faster than gossip at the barber shop, and for once, I didn't mind being the center of attention. People kept stopping by the farm, either to shake my hand or to drop off fresh baked goods, as if I had taken down a dangerous outlaw instead of a nosy neighbor with a superiority complex. I accepted every pie, loaf of bread, and casserole with a grin. After all, I had earned it. But I knew this wasn't over yet. Karen wasn't the type to go down without a fight. She had money, connections, and an ego too big to accept the idea of community service, let alone jail time. She would hire a lawyer, probably some big city hotshot who specialized in getting rich people out of trouble, and try to wriggle her way out of this mess. That meant I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me next. Andy was one step ahead, as always. He sat on my porch, scrolling through his phone with a smirk. She hired a guy named Bradley Moore. Real slick. Thinks he's a genius. I sighed, already exhausted. Great. What's his angle? Andy chuckled. Oh, you're gonna love this. He's claiming some drifter set the fire. Says you've got no real proof that Karen did it. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. Right, because drifters are just wandering around looking for farms to burn. Andy grinned. Exactly. But that's not the best part. He's also saying that you set Karen up because you have some kind of personal vendetta against her. I nearly choked on my coffee. A vendetta? She burned my damn farm down. Andy shrugged. Apparently, you're the bad guy in this story. I should have been furious, but honestly, I just found it hilarious. Karen was really trying to flip the narrative, to paint herself as the innocent victim. But she had underestimated just how much the town despised her antics. The trial was set for the following week, and when the day arrived, I walked into that courtroom feeling like I was about to witness the season finale of a soap opera. Karen sat at the defendant's table, wearing a pastel pink suit that made her look like an overconfident real estate agent. Her lawyer, Bradley Moore, had that smug, overly polished look that screamed, "I charge by the second." I sat with Sheriff Dave, who leaned over and muttered, "I can't wait to see her squirm." The prosecutor laid out the case with ease. The footage, the confession, the burned boots, it was a solid pile of evidence. Karen's lawyer tried to poke holes in it, but every time he made a point, the prosecutor calmly countered it. Karen sat there, arms crossed, shooting me death glares every few minutes. Then came the real fun. The prosecutor played the footage of my fire drill, specifically the part where Karen had panicked and yelled, "Not again!" The courtroom murmured. Bradley Moore stood up, clearing his throat. "My client simply has an understandable fear of fires." The prosecutor didn't even blink. And yet, when she was first questioned, she claimed the fire was just an accident and that she wasn't concerned. So which is it? Fear or indifference? Bradley stammered for a moment before quickly moving on. But it was clear. The tide was turning against Karen. Then came the moment that sealed the deal. Sheriff Dave stood up and presented the final piece of evidence. A witness statement. Not just any witness. Karen's own husband, Richard. The courtroom went silent. Karen's mouth fell open as Richard, looking tired and defeated, walked up to the stand. "I never thought I'd be doing this," he said, sighing. "But I can't keep covering for her." Karen shot up from her chair. "Richard, what are you doing?" He avoided her gaze. "Telling the truth." Richard explained that Karen had come home late the night of the fire, smelling like smoke, mumbling about how she had finally taught that farmer a lesson. She had tossed her boots in the garage, not realizing that Richard had seen the ash on them. He had kept quiet at first, hoping it would all blow over, but when he saw how far she was willing to go to deny it, he couldn't take it anymore. The courtroom erupted. Karen looked like she was going to explode. Her lawyer sat down, defeated. The judge called for order before finally announcing the verdict. Karen was found guilty of arson and sentenced to community service and a hefty fine. No jail time, but the punishment was poetic enough to make up for it. And that's how Karen Withers, the woman who complained about my farm every chance she got, ended up being sentenced to working on it. The first day of her community service was, without a doubt, the most satisfying moment of my life. She showed up in expensive sunglasses, wearing what she clearly thought was farm attire, a brand new flannel shirt that had probably cost more than my tractor. I greeted her with a bucket and a shovel. "Welcome to the job, Karen," I said with a grin. "Hope you like manure." She glared at me. "This is beneath me." I shrugged. Not according to the court. For the next 2 months, she had to do everything she had once complained about, feeding the animals, fixing fences, even stacking hay bales. Every time she grumbled, I reminded her that it was either this or jail. To make things even better, the town didn't let her live it down. Everywhere she went, people snickered. Someone even printed T-shirts that said, "Justice for the hay bales." I bought one. By the time her sentence was over, Karen was a changed woman. Not in a deep, meaningful way, she was still insufferable, but she had been humbled. She never complained about my farm again. In fact, she barely spoke to me at all, which was just fine. A few weeks after her sentence ended, Andy came by the farm, laughing as he held up his phone. "You're not gonna believe this." I leaned over to look. It was a listing for Karen's house. She was moving. I couldn't help but grin. Guess she finally had enough. Andy chuckled. I think she realized she messed with the wrong farmer. As I watched the sun set over my now peaceful farm, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Karen had burned my hay, but in the end, she had only burned herself. And that was the best kind of justice.